Okay, approximately this is where we had left off with last time. With cerebrum is kind of a vague term. Why would that be? Why might that be? It does. That's true. How many sides does it have? It's got two sides to it. Now, people could argue that, yeah, the cerebellum does too, but I shouldn't be disputing what maybe authors or doctors might say, but to me, it just makes more sense. You say the cerebrum has two sides and the cerebellum only has one. Then you got the brain stem and then the diencephalinon. Now, one of the things that I believe that we have talked about before, what is a type of that would apply to you, and I think it would apply to you, the rest of you, and maybe yourself. We're talking about manual transmissions. You've driven that before, the rest of you. And the reason I say yourself, skid loader, okay, and maybe you, okay. Now, with that skid loader, what do we know about that? When you got your, are you driving with two levers like this, okay, to operate the bucket? Is that on the levers like this, or is it foot pedals? Okay. How long does it take to get, do you remember the first time manual transmission or skid loader? Do you remember that first time climbing in there and working that? Was kind of rough. Was kind of rough. Stall. Here's a man. I'm stuck in second gear. That sound about right? No? I don't know. Do you run into anything with the skid loader? Probably. You didn't almost. I've almost flipped one over because it's easy to do. Because one of the things for you, if you don't know anything about, when you get a lot of weight and it's all the way up top like this, you can start doing one of these. Or if you're going up an incline and you got that bucket up, it's almost flip it over backwards. And it is scary. No one's going to deny that. Okay? But with that, those types of movements, yes, it's part of your coordination in your cerebral cortex. But if we remember from that video, where is that information stored? Yes, your visual input through your optic lobes will help as far as when to maybe shift gears in a manual transmission or when to lift your bucket, because what happens is in driving that skid loader, what would it be for moving grain, or what would it, scooping snow, or?
Yeah, like the bags of stuff and I put it in the seed timer, flip it up.
Okay.
Bag of seed, I guess.
The reason I say that is, for me, I don't operate a skid loader often enough. And what happens is, all right, so if we're loading sand in what's maybe called a top dresser, we'll just, because that's what you would put sand in, okay? So you got it up in your bucket, okay? And then you drive to where you're going to dump it, stop, and then tip it down, tip it back up, stop, and then down. But that's not how people who are experienced with driving a skid loader would do it, would they? Because as they're coming forward, it's going up at the same time, come to a stop, and it's tipped down. They're backing up where it's coming up like this and back down. All that is stored not in your optic lobes, not in your cerebral cortexes, but what other brain, no, what, I almost said brain stem, what other part of your brain, if you remember from that video. It's the other part of the brain that we haven't mentioned yet. back here. Like shooting free throws is what the video had used as an example. That muscle memory is stored where? In your cerebellum. That's right. All right, so keep in mind, you've got, again, 4 main structures. You got your cerebral cortexes, which is one, brainstem, diencephalinon, and then your cerebellum. All right. We've done this one, all right? Correct? Okay. And then moving forward. See what happens. We'll kind of touch upon this a little bit next chapter when we begin discussing the endocrine system, because that deals with hormones. And as we know, that is also one of your functions of the brain, dealing with these. And the abbreviation is called a TBI. And individuals in the Army, it doesn't necessarily have to be the Army, it could be any one of the our armed services, if they have something called a TBI. I don't know why you would know this, but maybe you do. Traumatic brain injury, that's right. Because what happens is, I would venture to think that in the early campaigns, not way early, Desert Storm, that was in the 1990s. That was way before your time. I remember watching parts of that on the news when I was a junior in high school, watching. What had happened was Iraq had invaded Kuwait, and depending upon what type of foreign policy you would believe, but does anyone know what Kuwait is known for that we would have interest in? It's 3 letters and starts with the letter O. Oil. Now, whether we would say that we have interest in that foreign policy, but us being the keepers of freedom across the world said, no, not so fast, Iraq. And that would have been Saddam Hussein. And I want to say that Iraq war, if you want to call it that, was, we thought that at that time, I think Iraq had one of the, within the top 10 more powerful armies in the world. And that campaign was over in a week. Okay? In other words, the U.S. forces got in there and they took care of business pretty quick. So not the early campaigns over there, more so back in 2001 after the World Trade Center came down. We find ourselves going back to that part of the region. Not so much Iraq this time, but Afghanistan instead. And what would happen is some of these vehicles on these convoys would get blown up, and that's rather unfortunate that that happens. But soldiers inside of these vehicles, there's really nowhere for that energy to be, let's say, I don't want to say dissolved, but dispersed. So if you're inside of there, your body can absorb a lot of energy, but sometimes it's just too much, and you got that helmet on, and it would rattle their heads pretty good. And oddly enough, some people would have lots of rage when they came back. And it was, at that time, we probably didn't know, it's nothing that they could get a handle on. We just thought, gee, Merry Christmas. They're angry when they come home. Well, part of it is it's having some effect on their brain chemistry, and that is rather unfortunate. So that did affect some people, because that is, as you can see, one of the major functions of the brain. Also, I think it happens to you people, you just don't know why. Okay? You smell something, and all of a sudden a memory pops up just like that. And I don't know if you can think of something right off the top of your head that that's possible. Maybe yes, maybe no. To me, probably some of the bigger indications is mowing of grass, perhaps, because that gives off an odor outside. And maybe different types of maybe suntan lotion or sunblock. Some of that has some characteristic smells too. It may take you back to a certain time. Oh, I remember when we were down in Florida, because you smell that suntan lotion or sunblock. Lotion for you, sunblock probably for me. But regardless, some of those smells can trigger different types of memories and emotions because that has a direct route right up into your brain. It doesn't have to go through your frontal cortex or anything else to be processed. Just kind of like marches straight up there and triggers a memory just like that. All right. There's 3 parts to the brain stem. As you can see, right in the middle, on top, and then the unhappy alligator here from Waterboy. That's why alligators are always so unhappy. Anyone ever seen Waterboy? They got, what was it? They got all those teeth and no toothbrush to keep them. I can't remember what it is. And the professor was saying, la medulla oblongata. Okay, but yes, that also, and that is true. This is not fully developed in reptiles yet. So what happens is they do have bits of rage in them, not because of a toothbrush. So unfortunately, Mama's wrong. So, sorry, Mom. Okay. And also what we see here, reflex centers associated with the eyes and movements. One of the things that we had done in here, we said we could pick on Olivia for some reason or another and just take a marker and do one of those. And then it's not, you might flinch just a little bit, but it's part of your midbrain, okay? That is part of your reflex center as well. Now, how quickly do reflexes take place? Obviously, very quickly. And thinking about driving home last night with that bus, gosh, I can't remember, because this movie was in Del Rapids, okay? Is there any, my wife, she's into this, it's called This Is Us. It's a show called This Is Us. Anyone ever heard of it? Okay? The character Jack, he's the dad in that show, but he also was in a movie called The Art of Racing in the Rain or something like that. And one of the things that, and I can see this being true if race car drivers were to do this, what they do is they induce their own skid or hydroplaning going into a turn. So if you're coming this direction and you purposely do that, you would be able to react to that a lot quicker rather than the race car doing that and causing it to wash my hands too many times. I can't snap very good. There we go. That's a little better. Rather than all of a sudden your car starts to skid out of direction just like that or out of control. All right. I believe that's where we want to stop for today. But one of the things that I do want you to continually practice would be what was on the back side of your vocabulary. And no surprise, that would be what? Okay? So we'll do this. I was just going to subtly turn around and see if anybody was paying attention. There, that was intentional. Just see if we're staying awake. Otherwise, maybe just say something stupid in the middle of class to see if we're staying awake. Does that help? Okay. Fair enough. Okay. The first few are obviously pretty easy. It's when you get down to these bottom ones, it gets a little more difficult. Is this one, are you better off just doing this on your own, or do you think we would benefit working as a group? I'll just let you ladies answer that. Okay? So we know smell, sight. Then this is part of your sight and your eye movement, so it's going to be a motor nerve, and therefore okay. Right? Get them to get that hamster to wake up because he's sleeping. Get that motor turning. What's that? I don't know if there's an A and then it's cochlear after that, vestibular cochlear. Okay. Now this is where it gets to be a little confusing for myself, but whatever it is that helps you keep these separate, I mean, sometimes what I'll do is I know that this is the 10th nerve. I mean, doesn't make it right. We want you to figure out a way that helps you keep this separate, okay? Because that way when we know where this one's at, okay, this tie is a what? Okay, so does that go above or below? Okay. So that leaves the glossopharyngeal and the hypoglossal. Now, looking at some of these names, okay, I think a better way to approach this is that we want you to know some very specific functions on what they would actually control. Okay? This, we want you to know that. First three, I think those are pretty straightforward. Okay? Smell and sight, and this moves your eyes. Okay? This one should be pretty straightforward. This one, I think, when you think of that, even though it says pharyngeal, where in the body do you think that is? The pharynx, which is where in your oral cavity? In the back of your mouth. Now, this might be a mixed nerve, but I believe it's also a motor nerve. So when you look in the back of your mouth, it must move something in your mouth. There's only one thing that it can move. The tongue. That's right. And this one's kind of crazy. Because Vegas, it's not because of Las Vegas. It doesn't get its name from that. It's not a gambling deal at all. Vegas is Latin for wanderer. Okay? And what that means is this cranial nerve wanders its way through your thoracic and abdominal cavity. And the terminal end is actually on the stomach. So what do we mean by terminal end? as it's winding its way through, it will branch off and stimulate lots of different type of structures, but the terminal end is the stomach. So that would be the last stop for this guy. Okay? And then for right now, let's just stop with that. Because I think, to me, it's probably more important to know what these are actually doing rather than making you memorize, okay, this one's sensory, this one's motor, this one's mixed. And you may have to do that down the road. But I think this is just as important, knowing what they're actually working on. Whether it's the tongue, whether it's the eyes, whether it's the nose, I think that's more important than knowing sensory, motor, mixed, or whatever that is. That's not to say that you won't have to know that, but this will get you a fairly good start to that. And whatever it is that you need to help yourself get these oriented in the proper order, that's what we want you to know. All right, that's all I have. We'll catch up to you next time.